Good morning.
We'll just give everybody a minute to join.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar on hurricane preparedness. We've muted all the participant devices to eliminate the background noise so everyone can hear clearly. The view options on your screen can be adjusted to display all panelists by navigating to the view options on the toolbar. Select the side-by-side option for optimal view. Feel free to submit questions at any time navigating to the Q&A option on the toolbar. Instructions on how to submit questions are being displayed on the screen. We'll take questions throughout the presentation as well as at the end. Just please try to keep them on topic and not too specific to your community. Thank you again for tuning into today's webinar. I'll now hand it over to my colleague, Chris Reynolds.
Good morning, everyone. And give me a quick second here. I'm just going to change my screen over. So welcome, everyone. Whoops. Share my screen here. Already shared my screen. Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Reynolds. I'm with Castle Group, and we have a wonderful webinar for you today. It's hurricane preparedness, things you can't afford to be hit by this storm. I'm going to allow my other counterparts to introduce themselves real quickly. And I'm going to share my screen with Michael here, who is going to take over the webinar. Michael, you should be able to have access to it now, and I can get in there.
Perfect. Is everybody able to see my screen now?
Not yet, I don't think.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, I'll start. Today's agenda.
Let's go ahead and introduce everybody real quickly. Sorry, I apologize. I went in there a little short, guys. So Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll go through the rest of the panelists here real quickly.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael York. I'm a director with the Econ Group. We're located in Southwest Florida. Been in business for about 20 years now, and we are a multi-disciplined construction management, engineering, and advisory firm. Derek?
Richard, you
All
want to go
right.
ahead?
Well, if nobody else is
Derek,
jumping in. All right. So I'm Derek Cox. I am the Director of Community Development for Blue Stream Fiber. And today I will be talking about the importance of communication and reliable communication.
Thank you. I'm Richard DeBose, Goody DeBose and Cross attorney.
And Amanda Broadwell, an attorney also at Goody DeBose and Cross.
All right. Well, thank you guys all for joining. I just wanted to quickly say what we're going to go over here as far as today's agenda. We're talking about hurricanes here and what we can't be afforded to hit. Unfortunately, here on the West Coast, which most of you are here for, we are unfortunately unfamiliar with hurricanes and how they've affected us over the last couple of years. We've all been familiar with what the damage has done. And so we wanted to kind of go over in the height of hurricane season here just before August and September, when we really start to see the season pick up. We wanted to go through a number of things here that can help prepare us. Obviously, we hope that there is nothing that hits us this year, but we want to be prepared for the worst. So we'll go into some opening remarks here. We'll go into how to protect yourself. We'll get into some hurricane planning and how we do that, what to do after, and then we'll kind of get into what to do from the storm and after the storm on how we can do that. We've got a great group of panelists here, so I will turn it over to you now. Mike, thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. And this will be at the end of the presentation as well, if you'd like our contact information. So at the very end, you can jot that down, or we'll send this presentation out to you. As Chris alluded to, unfortunately, in the last few years, we've been plagued with a number of named storms coming through the west coast of Florida, or if you're on the east coast of Florida, we've been touched there a little bit as well. And routinely in our world, and I'm sure Amanda's and Richard's, a lot of people, we preach the same things over and over and over again, about having a plan and the accountability and and thought process that goes into making sure that you have a structured system in place prior to a storm. But people often kind of either don't rely on that, or it gets to be an emotional, chaotic time and they deviate from that plan. So we're really trying to step out to the community, educate them on a proven approach, a proactive strategy before the storm. We are coming into a time of year when things start to escalate a little bit, and we start to get a little bit more nervous on what's going to happen. Are we going to have more named storms? And the intensity tends to increase at this time of year, given our climatic issues as well as water temperatures. So having that process or plan in place right now is imperative during the storm, what to do. And then post-storm environment is really when a lot of people start to make mistakes. They fumble over themselves by making, by deviating from the plan again, or making misinformed decisions. And then the reconstruction process, which is extremely important. So we've put together a team of individuals, men and women, that I think are very well suited to serve you in implementing a plan or discussing a plan moving forward. This is something here that I talk about in every one of our presentations, and probably ask Richard and Amanda to jump in on. But what are your duties and responsibilities as an association? And a lot of this comes down to the reconstruction process, or in the pre-storm environment, and what to do, and what your responsibilities and duties as an association or board member might be.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. You're right, Mike. The primary responsibility of the board of directors and the association is to maintain, repair, replace, and protect the common elements and the units. So that protection part of it is the key for this. And hurricane preparedness is directly related to helping to protect the property from potential damage and harm. And that's why it's so important that you have a plan in place, not just a day before the storm is about to hit, say, what are we going to do? That could really open the board up to criticism for failure to be proactive and to protect the association from what is obviously foreseeable potential harm, because we have a history of hurricanes, so you can't say you weren't aware of it. We always have 5 or 8 days notice of the potential track. So sitting back and doing nothing, you're technically breaching your fiduciary duty to protect the association.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, and I even think it goes back to, I want to add to that. I think it even goes back to obviously planning. At Castle, one of the things that we make a point to do is making sure prior to season, not only doing a dry run of a potential issue coming in, but also making sure that you do have plans in place where you're working with, and I may be getting ahead of them, but making sure that you have plans in place where you're working with your respective contractors to be prepared ahead of time. We'll get into that, I think, a little later, right, too.
Yeah, and I think the intent behind, this slide too, is Richard alluded to. I mean, you have advance notice. You know that we're in sort of a tunnel, so to speak, of a geographical area in which have been prone to these storms. So you do have a responsibility to implement, to develop a plan and implement a plan on behalf of the association and the stakeholders. It's not, a day ahead of time and can say, well, we didn't know something was coming. How to protect yourself prior to hurricane season. Each one of the 3 phases that we're going to talk about, I think, is equally important. But if you really want to set yourself up for success, and to achieve that in a timely, cost-effective manner, I really believe that it starts in planning early, and developing a thoughtful strategic plan. So prior to hurricane season, I encourage you all to discuss your insurance policy with somebody like Amanda and her team. Your insurance agent is wonderful, and they are a wonderful resource and a valuable resource for you. But I also think it behooves you, and Amanda, you can jump in and discuss how you would look at an insurance policy, and what you might do and how it could benefit or hurt. Also, the presiding jurisdiction of a policy, if you can talk to some of the nuances they've put in these policies as of lately, since maybe Irma.
Yeah, sure. So it's one of the common questions we get I normally talk to boards of directors after a storm, and the first question I ask is, where's your insurance policy and what does it cover? And that's normally the last thing on the board's mind at that time. So definitely good to get ahead of that. When you're doing your renewal is a good time to talk with your broker, and our office is happy to talk with you as well. Things that I look for, obviously the board's always looking for what's the premium, what's it going to cost, and what are your policy limits, which are going to be set by an appraisal. But there are a lot of different forms of insurance policies that are out there, and the changes just keep coming every year. There are things that don't allow you to potentially recover what's called depreciation sometimes they'll limit it for roofs. So even if you replace your full roof, you might not be able to claim that full amount just pursuant to the black and white terms of your insurance policy. There are insurance policies that have limits for certain things like mitigation costs. And we know that if you get a lot of water in your building, mitigation costs can add up. So we want to make sure insurance limits for those types of things are sufficient for what you might expect. And then you mentioned the jurisdiction. There are a lot of insurance policies now that are moving so that if you do have a dispute with your insurance company after a storm or after any loss, you might have the only option of, let's say, going to New York to a private arbitration. Rather than filing a lawsuit in your hometown, you would have to go to New York and argue with the insurance company there. And obviously there's benefits for the insurance company in something like that, but certainly it's something that you want to be looking out for. And like Michael said, doing this when you're renewing is definitely a good time when there's a little bit more peace, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think we've seen them in Delaware, Hawaii more recently. But I think what we've tried to advocate for is having this done in a less chaotic or emotional time, and especially looking for somebody such as yourself. I think that's the most interesting thing about GD&C is you guys have a full suite of services. Everything's in-house. There's better alignment of communication, especially with Richard and John and others experienced in the general counsel realm, to have everything under one roof, but really to meet ahead of time in case there is something that arises. I think it really behooves the association to sit down with insurance claim representation to make sure that they have a relationship with somebody and they're not just frantically looking and signing on the dotted line with the first person that becomes available to them in a post-storm environment. Because really, you guys, you do so much for the associations, and it can either be, a successful outcome, a great outcome, or it can really be a detriment to the association post storm if they align themselves with the incorrect representation. And in my opinion, from what we've seen.
Yeah, and Amanda, you hit on also just something that I thought was important too, is the dynamic of things changing. Obviously, insurance is changing, but there's a lot of things that have changed within our industry, and that ultimately I think is something that I know we've talked about this in a number of events where it's just that annual review where now is if you're going to review your insurance, now is not only a good time, but it's also something that needs to be done, I think, regularly. So it's something that you understand what's there, what is insured, what is not insured, and again, I think that's changing. So I advise people to definitely get with their insurance agents to review that on an annual basis at least. So.
Yep. I agree. Also in this, is authorizing any type of retainer agreements. We particularly at the Econ Group have preferred clients or retainer agreements with associations that are set up ahead of time that authorize us to come on site in a post-storm environment and document everything. We also do it prior to the storm, so we have pre-existing condition and post-existing condition. Because the first thing they'll claim with Amanda is hey, this was just general wear and tear, age, etc. So at least we have photographic time-stamped evidence that shows pre-existing condition versus post-existing condition. Landscape agreements, you should have with your landscaping firm, whoever that might be, an agreement so that they can access the facility, that they're pre-authorized up to a certain amount to make sure that the roadways in general are clear and safe for movement as well as emergency response. There's agreements, Richard, I believe, for associations to execute so that the waste management I think it's waste management can come through and clear some of that debris if it's authorized, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and I believe there's also an agreement with FEMA that you can have in place or be prepared to implement as well, because they'll do some of the cleanup or reimburse you for it.
Yep. So those should be looked at. Restoration firms, again, just like meeting with Amanda, Richard, and their team, meeting with a restoration firm, even though we may go through this year and not need anyone, but you should have that relationship built because these are areas where you are really vulnerable to be taken advantage of by an institution that may not have either your best interest or may not have the capabilities after the storm to handle your capacity and what your association may require. So having a relationship with them, also getting a copy of their agreement that would be issued so that Richard has ample time to review it, or his team, and look for nuances that would be detrimental to the association, allows Richard to be a little bit more strategic and proactive in that. Correct, Richard?
Yeah, and let me say, and I know Amanda will agree with this, and I know Chris and everybody on here has been through this. If you do nothing from this seminar, go take away from the seminar is go find out who your emergency response mitigation team is going to be. What dry out company are you going to hire? Get on their preferred list, read their contract, let your lawyer look at the contract in the calm of no storm on the horizon, and be prepared to use that. The number one mistake that every community makes is they don't have a vendor in place. The first guy that shows up throws a one-page piece of paper or maybe 2 pages on them while the water is flooding around their ankles, and they say, sign this or I'm going down the street and you'll never get anybody to help you. And the board signs it, and years later they get a bill for exorbitant bill. They never read the fine print that said the people are coming from out of state and you're going to pay for their hotel and their travel and their food and their per diem, and you're going to do all of this. And then you look at the fine print and you try to fight back, and it's too late. So the number one mistake is knee-jerk reaction of hiring the mitigation company under the pressure of your owner screaming. Get that in place now. Let your lawyer look at it, and you will save yourself tremendous avoid headaches in the future. And Amanda may have something to say on this.
Yeah, 100% agree. Get with someone ahead of time and let your lawyers look at the contract, make sure you understand what you're signing ahead of time, but certainly it will avoid a lot of headaches down the road.
I'd even go one further and have a second company as a backup. So after a hurricane, and I will kind of allude to what we saw with after, I think Helene and Milton, obviously this last year, but also Ian that kind of hit us directly here in Southwest Florida, where you had a number of, I mean, it was such these last couple storms have been so impactful that it has really done to where your local resources are exhausted pretty quickly. So you are almost having to use outside resources that you had. And so having that agreement, I think, in place, having a backup is probably not a bad idea, because those resources from a roofer, from a restoration company, they could get exhausted pretty quickly as a local contractor, because they do have a lot of people calling them. So make sure to back yourself up and make sure that you're prepared, even with somebody that might be as a secondary, that in the event that you call and your team tells you that they can't respond. So reviewing the contracts is huge. I think that's important. We've seen kind of what Richard alluded to is we've seen the cases where in my previous career, where you'd be on a job and somebody is literally not letting you leave until they get crews there. It's something that obviously that's the reaction that we all have is we want to make sure that things are taken care of after an event, but not at the detriment of the property that you're going to be dealing with a huge bill potentially. So.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we've seen it. I mean, you have 20 people working on site, but there's 220 people they have in the area, and you're paying for their per diems, as Richard alluded to. 300 fans, but only 20 are plugged in, but you're being charged for 300, and the escalation of fees for products and services. So, continuing on protecting yourself prior to hurricane season. At the bottom, every that you'll see in black, the last bullet point, everything we're doing is trying to evaluate and ways to mitigate your risk on an annual basis. We are trying as best we can to educate you, to give you thought-provoking ideas, things that seem rudimentary in nature, but are continuously not implemented by associations and put themselves in vulnerable positions. So we're just looking every single year for ways to mitigate your risk, and that's what we're trying to educate here. So pre-storm building evaluations, important documents, building plans, your governing docs, vendor list, an ERP plan, which is an emergency response plan. These are critical in many instances. They also have photo documentation. They have quantifications. There's firms that specialize in this. Anything that has photo documentation related to it, building plans, get them elevated, get them stored digitally. It's very easy and affordable to do that now. I can't tell you how many times that we go to an association after a storm, and we're working, with Richard, Amanda, or we're just in the reconstruction process, and nobody has any building plans, or they were completely submerged. And that's just a wasted cost for the association, in my opinion, for us to reconstruct those. Yes, it's a revenue source for us, but at the end of the day, I don't want my team tied up developing plans that were pre-existing we could have salvaged. I'd rather have them work on the active construction environment. Any facade and roof inspections done pre-storm season. Typically, we would prefer that these were done in the May area. And then we could house those and do post-condition assessments as well as roof inspections, making sure that your roof is structurally sound. Any debris is removed, any caulking or sealants that need to be touched up can. Fasteners that need to be applied, scuppers need to be cleared. All those types of things that we need to have done from a roofing perspective, as well as photo documentation. Get those out of the way, and you should be on some semi-annual or biannual agreement with a contractor, roofing contractor. Amanda, did you have anything else to add in regards to this slide?
Yeah, I think it's important. Just what we don't think about necessarily after the storm is how important these documents are and this documentation, because the insurance company is coming in after the storm. They're sending an adjuster who's looking at your building for the very first time. And oftentimes we see reports coming back saying, basically, this is an old building. There's wear and tear here. Maybe it wasn't in great condition before the storm. And I'm hearing the board, the unit owners saying, we didn't have this type of water damage. Yes, we had, an older roof or older windows, but everything was watertight and fine before the storm. And it becomes a big issue of contention where we're trying to basically prove, yes, it was in an older condition, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't damaged by the storm. So it's much easier to show that if you have these reports before the storm, obviously documenting the condition of your building. And if you do something like a roof inspection, you find some minor issues, you repair those, all of that documentation can be given to your insurance company to show the exact condition at the time of the storm was that you did have a watertight building. And obviously, if the hurricane affects that, you could have insurance coverage there.
Yep.
I'd just like to add something, Mike. So I think the running theme up until this point, preparing ahead of time. And again, I'm going to be talking about, fiber optics and communication, but my years of experience in property management, I have seen it way too many times where the preparation wasn't done and the regret is so palpable when a storm hits. The time, think about it like this, a car accident. The time to think about buckling up is not when the car is barreling into your side at an intersection. It's to do things ahead of time when it's relaxed and you can think calmly about it, make sure you're prepared properly. When you see the cone on the map, you've got a few days. Before that happens, you have weeks and months. You need to take action now. If anybody gets anything out of this, to Richard's point earlier, it's making sure that you're taking care of this now. You're enlisting the proper vendors now. You're doing all of the homework ahead of time, so you're not regretting it as soon as you see the spaghetti lines across the Gulf of what is it, Mexico, America, whatever it is now. The
I don't
Gulf.
know
We'll leave it
or
there.
what, yeah, I don't know if we know what it is. But yeah, I mean, you look at Irma, I think it was Irma or Ian. I can't remember. It might have been Ian, where we were in Naples specifically. I mean, we were at the bottom of the cone. We were kind of almost even outside it. And I was just looking at it. I'm like, I think this thing may come our way. It may hit us. And even my wife was like, no way, we're watching the news. But I mean, within a matter of hours, this thing, shifts course based on whatever, environmental factors that we have going on. And you are just I mean, you're right in the eye of the storm, very quickly. So it's just best to be prepared. And we're looking for ways, again, to mitigate risk, put a plan in place in a calm manner, that protects the stakeholders, of the association. Derek, coming back to you, prior to hurricane season, communication is one of the biggest pains during a storm. We know that, electric goes out, and we lose channels of communication. But I think what you guys are doing at Blue Stream is very interesting. And to me, it's very valuable from an association standpoint to get back up and running very quickly. So can you talk a little bit about what Blue Stream is doing and how it's affected during the storm situation?
Yeah, again, this kind of goes almost to what I was just saying. It's about preparing your entire network ahead of time. So there's a very big difference, and this is the reason why everybody's going to fiber optics. It's obviously better for communication, speed, reliability. I think everybody understands all of that. But specifically here in Southwest Florida, where we're dealing with hurricanes, there is a very big difference between the reliability of fiber optics and what we've all been used to over the last several decades, copper and coaxial. So if you think about fiber optics, it's glass and it's light. Glass, it doesn't matter how much water you're dealing with, glass is glass. It's not going to corrode. You don't have mechanics along the way. You just have your two endpoints. So where there are issues with the old systems, it's that water overwhelms the system, mechanically, and obviously with the salt water, it's going to corrode the system and it's going to need repair. So for fiber optics, specifically with this topic, it's extremely reliable because again, it's glass. We bury our lines 18 to 24 inches. So you're not going to have to worry about debris. You're not going to have to worry about items like that. And when it comes to flooding, again, it's glass and it's light. You're not going to have to worry about outages when it comes to that. The main outages you're going to find are power outages. Now, in our case, we hook up battery backups. That all comes with it. But generators, as long as we can get power to the system, it's intact. So it's going to be up and running and you're going to be able to communicate. The other thing is, again, just being proactive, making sure that your system has some backups. Now, we always, and other companies too, but we always make sure we have redundancy, duplicity. So if there is an issue with one line, you're not going to have that kind of an issue for your association because there's two paths for communication to come in. So it's just, again, it's just kind of being proactive. What is best for this area? And this, you can go ahead and switch the slide, but that's one of the things that I find is so unique with communications. When cell towers are down, I mean, we've all lived through all these hurricanes, and like an idiot, I've stayed for every one of them. So I know how it is. It's a lot of fun when the power goes out. I
Yeah.
mean, I know I'm trying to think if it was Irma or Ian, but we didn't have power for I think 13 days where I live. Fortunately, we had a brand new Publix near us and they had a generator. And I literally worked with probably 20 other people in their little cafe area at a new Publix because they had a generator and they had internet. You need to plan ahead. You don't want to have to rely on going to a grocery store to take care of your communication. So you
Yeah.
can go ahead and flip the slide.
So imperative though, I just want to say, like once we get moving through the storm environment, it is really imperative to look at this, especially as your agreements come up or talking to somebody like Bluestream that has this technology and what it can mean for your association. That must have been fun though, Derek, to sit through 13 days
I,
in
Yeah.
I made some
public.
really good friends over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Everybody that worked from home, we were all buddies after about 10 days.
Well, and what kind of you alluded to it, Derek, too, is like, having the properties, I think, up and running again, just with internet, whether they have power or not, or they're using, excess power from a generator, it's something that communication is instrumental for not
Oh,
only, I think, the property itself, but you think about the crews that are working there, they're typically having to communicate that way. Because again, what we run into, especially right after the storm, is the cell towers are a lot of times they're jammed because so many people are trying to use the system. So if you have an alternate resource, whether it's email or we know that a lot of times if you're connected to a signal, you can do Wi-Fi calling. So it's something that
yep.
allows you to still be able to communicate. Because I can tell you, I've been on these properties after a storm, and you can't even get your phone to call out. So it's something that it's huge to have that
Oh, it is.
resource right after the storm. So if you have not gone to fiber optics, please get with, that's something that predominantly is, kind of orchestrated by the entire community, I think, taking it on. If I'm correct, Derek, in saying
Yeah,
that,
yeah. No, it's an
but
associate.
it's something that is really, really important, I think, during hurricane season that
Well, and the
we have
difference,
that.
just to let you know, again, just because the resiliency of the system itself,
Yep.
with with Ian, in 24 hours, we had 100% of our communities, habitable communities. Obviously, if they
Yep.
were floating in the ocean, not so much, but habitable communities, 100% up and running. And that's because not only is the system resilient, but again, if it's a power issue, then we can always bring a generator, which we
Yep.
did, and we had everybody up and running. I mean, imagine having to wait 13 days to communicate versus 13 hours. It's night and day. So big
That's
proponent of making sure you have stable communication throughout.
No, I agree. And during the storm, having a point of contact, both local and offsite. We have a lot of residents that tend to be seasonal that go up north. Having multiple points of contact so that the association is still able to operate and execute, even if somebody is down with, as Chris alluded to, our cell towers become overwhelmed. They become inundated with additional personnel coming into town. And so it's a very chaotic situation, especially from that standpoint. So having multiple points of contact is extremely important. I do want to emphasize in Chris's world, I see so often that the managers are put in unfair, unjust situations. They are not always going to be your main point of contact, and you need to discuss that as an association. They have their own lives, their families, their own residences. That they need to be accountable for as well. So that needs to be a point of discussion ahead of time, and you can't rely on them solely. They may not be able to access the facilities from wherever they've gone to. In Sarasota, you look at Longboat, Bradenton Beach, Anna Maria Island. We had to access the facilities via boat, and I had to retain a private boat captain who knew that would be part of my job coming out of college, right? But had to negotiate with a boat captain to get us to facilities that were accessible by boat to evaluate and see if they were safe for habitation and occupancy. But at the end of the day, the managers and the island wasn't accessible by car. So that is something to think about. I am going to talk about the next few items, but I do want Richard and Amanda to jump in. Elevator equipment. I hear so frequently, well, it's got to be left at ground level. It's got to be this. It's just, it's mandated. When the governor declares a state of emergency, especially for your region, all bets are off. Move the elevator specifically, the housing unit or module above floodplain. So third, fourth, fifth floors. Do not just leave it sit there and be submerged. Yes, your pits Your elevator, shafts and pits may be exposed to the elements. That's okay. We can work around that. But you're unjustly paying for a couple hundred, 200, $300,000 worth of housing units that don't necessarily need to be accounted for. Move them above grade, and we also don't have the ability to move residents up and down once we are able to occupy the building again. Electrical equipment, turn off if the storm becomes bad, if we become submerged in water and take on elevated levels of storm surge, turn the electrical equipment off and do not turn it back on until it's been evaluated by a licensed electrical engineer. Cars, same things, elevate. Richard, Amanda, anything to say, even the last point as well, but we saw a lot of issues with many of these items where people didn't put a lot of thought into this
Yeah,
and cost a lot of
the
money.
main thing is under the Condominium Act 718-1265 and the Cooperative Act 719 and HOA Act, but less so for the HOA Act, you have emergency powers, which are triggered when a state of emergency is declared in your area, either through an evacuation, whether it's voluntary or mandatory, it doesn't matter. When that occurs, the statutes trigger your emergency powers, which are very important. The number one thing you need to have in place is order the building to be evacuated, okay? You cannot force people to leave, and many of them will not leave, but you need to order the building evacuated with an official document that you have already prepared in your file. All you got to do is sign it and date it and insert the name of the storm, and you submit that to all the owners. The reason that's so important is if you order the building evacuated and then you follow the rest of your plan, which should be noticed to the owners, we will be turning off the elevators at X time and date. We will be turning off the electricity potentially, or it may go out at this time and date. If you follow your plan and you've ordered the building evacuated and somebody gets hurt because they're going down an unlit stairwell, 19 stories, and they fall and they break their leg, if you've ordered the building evacuated and they refuse to have left, then the statute says you're indemnified and are insulated from suit for allowing the building to be in a dangerous condition. So that's extremely important. You cannot go up there and drag them out of their unit and make them leave, and you shouldn't even try to do it. But they need to be aware that the building has been ordered to be evacuated, and if they choose to stay and are injured, there is no liability on the association. So that's extremely important to have that in place and ready to go when the evacuation order from the state or the county or the city comes.
And I hope everybody, listens to Richard. It's not, this still gives me chills to even talk about, but after several storms and we try to present this information to you guys religiously. It probably seems like a burden to you, or we're over educating you. But we saw more than two handfuls of people that tried to make changes or leave, evacuate during the storm environment and lost their lives. And that's not something that, we take lightly, or that you want to see, or we want our staff to see, or the management firm to see. But it is, we try to educate and do our best, but this is something, listen to Richard's advice. I mean, we see this at least a handful, if not more, each named storm. Same thing with cars, having somebody at a valet company, an agreement with them to come in, have all the keys on site, elevate everything up. It allows us to access the facilities in a more safe, expedited manner than having, after Ian, I had a friend of mine that has heavy duty equipment, and we were just chaining cars up and dragging them out so that we could evaluate the facilities. So again, another easy fix for the association. Derek, I'm tossing it back to you. I think we talked a little bit about this, but I threw it in prior to the restoration component of this, and you guys getting the facilities back up and running.
Yeah. So just again, just going back to what I was saying before, um, that's why fiber optics as a whole is such a better communication system, obviously for internet, but just raw communication than the old landlines or the copper internet methods out there, because it's resilient against water, it's resilient against these storms. And this is just yeah, in for Ian in 22, right on the water, we had 29 communities that were impacted. Within 8 hours, 60% of them up, and again, 100% within 24 hours. That's because the system is built that way. Obviously, I'll benefit. I think I work for a great establishment, and I think we go the extra mile. But it's so important to think about these things ahead of time because communication, as we all know, is so vital prior to and post when everybody's concerned. And again, as I mentioned, we actually lay the glass 18 to 24 inches into the ground. And you can even see on the right here, cabinets we use. These are actually Cat 5 rated cabinets. They're sealed. They are air conditioned. They have their battery backups. So it gives us some time to get there with a generator if power goes out, but we do have ports on every one of them so we can bring those generators out and get everybody up and running. Because those cell towers, when those go out, it's chaos. And I remember thinking, and again, I don't remember which storm it was, but there's the old adage, it takes 3 days for society to break down. On the third day, I was I was waiting in line at a gas station, one of the only gas stations open. A fist fight broke out in front of me. And I thought,
Yeah.
3 days, yeah, that's about right. So yeah, plan ahead. Believe me, I don't worry about gasoline now anymore. I make sure I'm stocked up beforehand. But communication is so vital. You really don't realize that you're off on your own until you're really off on your own. So
And a lot of our, the Dan Summers of the world in Southwest Florida, specifically in Collier County, he's taken the initiative. Our water control systems have all now, each one has a generator attached to them, lines below grade. So a lot of what you're discussing is what the counties are implementing so that they can stay up. That's what allowed a lot of the water to flood throughout Naples. We just didn't have the capacities that the levees broke in the dams. So once power went down, so they took it upon. I don't know that they have 100% up yet, but I know it was a phased plan over so many
I
years.
gotta say, or storm after storm, I give credit to everybody. I mean, it has gotten better. Literally, you can see it storm by storm. Everybody's learning more and more. But we got a ways to go.
It's an evolving process. All right, Amanda and Richard, I'm going to keep picking on you, but now we've gone through the pre-storm environment, what needs to be done. We've gone through the active storm environment and touched on that and some of the changes. But after the storm, it's a very chaotic environment. It's a very emotional and it's very aggravating. There's lack of sleep. There's lack of communication, air conditioning. So people are just on edge, food, water, resources. And now we have to deal on top of all of that. We have to deal with this, with this huge mess that we have in the association. So, previous documentation, I want to touch on and we'll come back to, but public adjusters. And I'm not picking on them, but I do think it's important for our audience, Amanda and Richard, are they all the same? I have an opinion on that, but I'll let you guys talk about it. And then how does it work with you as the legal counsel versus a public adjuster? And what can you do that they can't do? And how might that benefit the association?
Yeah, I can jump in here to start, and Richard can fill in anything I miss, I suppose. After the storm, we see just an influx of vendors coming in. There is an industry around post-storm, right? So we see those vendors that Richard said come with a sheet of paper and say, sign it now or else. You will see other vendors like public adjusters coming in, and public adjusters have a role. They are statutorily created. They are licensed professionals. Not to say anything bad about public adjusters, but like Michael said, there are differences in public adjusters. They are there to help you with your insurance claim. That is what they professionally do. They know how to compile claims, or they should know how to compile claims, present those to your insurance company, and help basically work through that claim investigation process. And I see a lot of public adjusters that we work with very regularly. We have mutual clients with associations. Some are certainly better than others. I would say vet those just like you would any other vendor that you're going to work with. As an association, talk with them, talk with legal counsel about their contract before you sign it to make sure you understand what you are signing. And make sure that you know and trust the people you're working with, because they can put a claim together that can change the trajectory without the board necessarily even realizing it. And that's the part where you want to have that communication with anyone who's coming into your building after a storm, but particularly someone who's working directly with the insurance company and communicating your claim to the insurance company. So you want to make sure you know what they're communicating, you know what the association's claiming, so that you're not surprised down the road of what actually was claimed.
Yeah.
I don't know, Richard, if you want to jump in, I see you're unmuted.
I want to hear Mike's thoughts on this. One of the biggest problems I've seen post-storm when everything's calmed down and the contractor's building is they say, look, we will rebuild your building for whatever the insurance company pays us. Okay. I find that to be a really horrible way to negotiate the price. And I know part of Mike's business is to review the work that's being done by the contractor. And I believe you should have a fixed price or some other method, not just we'll take whatever the insurance company pays us, because that always ends up being a fight because you always get less than you think you should.
Yeah, and I think taking it one step further, the public adjusters are there. They get a percentage of your claim, right? Whether that's 10 or 12%, it's in that realm. And Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's for the entirety of that claim. So even if you have to go past a public adjuster and retain Amanda's services, you are not off the hook from paying that public adjuster. But one of the things that I see is that public adjusters come in and they will compile these claims, and they don't care if they settle for the amount in what Richard's discussing here, or if it's $1 million claim and they get you 4 million, they're getting 40,000 and they're moving on, and we're stuck left picking up the pieces along with Richard and Chris and the management side. So we want to make sure that that claim is whole. There's several different ways that we can structure that, which would be a fixed price contract, guaranteed maximum not to exceed, or we do cost plus contracts. So everything is open book and completely transparent based off what the wants and needs of the association are. But we have to make sure it's made whole. And in many of these cases, we look at claims and they're turning through these volume of claims and associations that they have, but they're not actually advocating, and I don't believe they can negotiate. Amanda, correct? That comes down to you. So they just take, or they want to advocate for whatever the initial amount is, and get that for the association. But that left, the association may get $1 million, but we have $4 million worth of damage. So how do we make the association whole at that point, Richard? Right? We have to either get financing, we have to special assess. There's a myriad of different things that we could do, but again, it goes back to the association paying an unfair share because they didn't take the time to go through their due diligence. So I think a lot of it falls back to me. I think Amanda is the avenue. She's the conduit, in my opinion, that best suits in many cases the association, and she'll work with public adjusters, but I'm not always sure that the public adjuster should be the front line of defense for the association. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the public adjuster can certainly do a lot to help the association. If there is a real dispute down the road, there is a line that the public adjuster obviously can't help continue necessarily with that dispute. So certainly that's when legal counsel would be more helpful than a public adjuster.
Well, and
Richard.
I kind of want to hit on something that that we've seen, I think, from the past couple hurricanes. Obviously, Irma had come about, that we saw years ago, that you saw a lot of these properties that started to use public adjusters after they got involved. But then I think once Ian hit, you saw that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you started to see where properties, they were pre-registered with a lot of, as they were with potentially their contractors, but they'd already pretty much signed or had an agreement with a public adjusting firm. And to me, I think that in the beginning stages of a storm or whatever, you may not know that the need is there for the PA yet or the public adjuster, but it's something that they're already pre set up for it. So it's something that I think they were making the steps to move forward with that public adjuster prior to knowing that they need it, ultimately causing some riff a little bit with the insurance company right away, whereas they're basically stating, you've already hired a public adjuster, so we are now going to have to go to negotiations where they are getting an attorney involved. And so it's something that I think, yes, the need is there sometimes for those properties, but is it needed to be, initiated at the start of the claim sometimes as well? So
Yeah, I think the point is, and Amanda can tell me if she agrees, you don't need to hire the public adjuster on day 3 after the storm. They're going to be there and they're going to want you to sign, but I believe that's premature until you've kind of evaluated the whole situation. And then they certainly are a valuable resource under the right circumstance, but you don't need to hire them the day after the storm. That's not, in my opinion. Amanda, what do you think?
Correct. Always, if you can work things out with your insurance company, give them what they need, get that investigation process going, see what they're going to pay or not, then obviously, if you need more professional help, vet those avenues as well.
Yeah, and allow the managers, they have a resource in this, but ultimately you don't necessarily need them, I think, right away. Having a firm like Econ at Michael's company, having somebody that is a project manager, that's something that I think a lot of properties get confused on, or they don't necessarily feel like they have someone that is running their project after the storm hits. So having somebody that you don't necessarily need an engineer, but you need a project coordinator, because again, Mike, you kind of hit on the fact that your property managers are going to be, for the most part, they will be busy after a storm hits. There's a lot of things that are going on, while their job is to help facilitate some of that stuff. And Castle did a great job after, I think, Ian and some of these other storms, that where it hit, we were up and running. But the point is that I think that you need to have somebody that can help control that, and it's not necessarily the public adjuster that's going to be the person. That's what at least my experience that I saw a lot of times is they wanted somebody to control the job, and they thought that the public adjuster was the way to go.
Yeah, let me just piggyback on that. This is likely going to be the most expensive budget item your condominium building will ever face. When you've had a major impact from a storm or a fire and you have to do the rebuild in the multi-millions of dollars. One of the things that I found in the years of doing this is when you have a project that big where you got to deal, and Mike will talk about the 50-50 rule, you got to deal with the local codes and the code officers, and you've got to deal with all of that with multiple trades on site. It is imperative that you hire a project manager like Econ or others that are not there doing the work. They know how the work's supposed to be done. They know the schedule, and they know how to manage the job. The biggest mistake I saw was, first of all, dumping it on your management company and say, manage this multi-million-dollar reconstruction project that's going to take 2 years. They're not trained or equipped to do that, number one. Number two, having the board say, well, I used to build houses in Arizona, so I can take over and manage this job. And guess what? A year later, nothing's been done. The board gets removed from office. A new board comes in and they do what they should have done all along, which is hire a project manager that is experienced. Is it going to cost money? Yes, it's going to cost you a lot of money, but you will save so much time and inefficiency by having a local project manager that knows how the system works in your locale to run the project. That is imperative, in my opinion.
Richard, actually, so prior to this, my property management was my field prior to this. So I just have to say something about this. There were so many times that I had to explain to board members the difference between property management and project management. A lot of people kind of clump that together and just assume, oh, well, you take care of all of that. It is so vital, just to your point, Richard, it is so vital to have an actual experienced project manager on the situation and somebody that has the connections locally, that has the experience with the municipalities and with all the laws and the regulations. I've seen that too many times too, where, well, our board is very good. We have an engineer on our board, and we have somebody that built houses on our board, and that's great, but that's not what this is. That is not
And
what this is at all.
our built environment is so different down here. That's what people have to recognize. And, we're open book, we're transparent with you. I don't have anything to hide. So for us, it's the coordination of, we have the advisors, the engineers in-house, we have the construction managers in-house. So we have a full suite. We put everything, in my opinion, a unique value proposition together, but that doesn't mean it's easy. There's a lot of dialogue and coordination with different, landscape architects, structural engineers, civil engineers. There's so many sub-tradesmen. I mean, we could have 50 sub-tradesmen working on a project. So having control over the contractual agreements, going out to bid, making sure we're getting the best value engineering your project, and helping oversee it with the, expediters of permits and inspections is critical to keep you on task and that critical path to completion implemented. So we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end and what that might mean for the association. I do want to touch quickly though on FEMA 50%. So people know there is a FEMA 50% rule, which there's no real standard, in my opinion, to this. It's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but you have to work with legal counsel such as Amanda so that you understand what is it that the association's trying to do. And if it could be the last 5 years of permits, it could be the last 12 months, there's so many different ways that they structure the FEMA 50% rule from municipality to municipality that we have to make sure that we are either abiding by it or we need to figure out a solution around it so that you don't have to bring every single component up to code. That's elevation, plumbing, electrical, etc. From A to Z. If you exceed that 50% of the reconstruction value, you have to bring it up to code, which can be a significant undertaking. To Richard's point. So we look at all of these things in tandem with the legal counsel. Amanda, I do want to touch base because this has changed over the last few years. The last two bullet points on this slide, the origination of the claim and a supplemental claim, and also the timeliness to file a claim. Can you explain, because we went from up here 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was, till after Irma, we kind of shrunk it down. Ian, we shrunk it down a little bit more. How long do they have to file a claim, and when does that start?
Yes, so currently you have 1 year to file a claim by Florida statute. That is the maximum amount of time. For a supplemental or reopened claim, which is adding something to a claim that you've already reported, you have 18 months. That used to be several years and it has been shrunken down. Now the maximum by statute is 1 year. But I say that with a big word of caution because your insurance policy, more likely than not, has something in there that says you must report a claim promptly. So promptly can be interpreted very differently from 1 year. So even if you report your claim 10 months down the road, it might not be prompt and the insurance company still can deny you and not pay you for that claim. So 1 year is like the maximum. I would always recommend if you're hit by a storm and you think you have even some damage, report the claim to your insurance company. And I know a lot of boards after various storms say, well, we didn't get hit that hard. Maybe we'll make a couple of roof repairs. We just have some debris to clean up. And then as the months go on, they're making more roof repairs, and they realize this is all from the storm and it's a lot bigger and worse because often after the hurricane season, we get into the fall and more dry season, and you might not see all of the damage. Report the claim, even if you think it's going to be below your deductible. Let the insurance company come out, document your roof after the storm, document your property after the storm, because then if you have more problems that you need to report, they fall into that supplemental category or reopened category, and it's much easier to then negotiate and work with your insurance company if you've already put them on notice. But if you wait, you might end up in a situation where your claim is just denied because by the time the insurance company gets out there, they're going to say, it's too late, too much time has passed, conditions have changed, and we can't evaluate whether what you're claiming was actually damaged by the storm you're reporting it to.
And thank you, Amanda. And just to be clear, it's from the time the storm makes landfall. It's not necessarily when the first band touches you. It's whenever the storm makes landfall. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then
Now, and Richard or Amanda, can you? So, is there any issues with filing a claim right afterwards, even whether you know or not? This is something I've had that question before, where it's they file a claim and they're concerned that ultimately they may get dinged because they filed a claim. It's in the event of a hurricane. Obviously, we know that the need is probably there, but is there any problem with filing that after the hurricane hits you? You've been impacted. You don't know, like to what you're alluding to, Amanda, is you don't know the impact of what it caused to your building. You don't think it's that bad. Is there any reason not to file that claim then?
Yeah, and that's normally the hesitancy is, well, that's just going to make my insurance premiums go up. The reality is, in my experience, that's not what insurance premiums go up because of. I'm not an insurance broker or a professional in that industry, but we live in Florida. If we get hit by a big storm, you can expect everybody's insurance premiums are going to go up because that's the industry as a whole. If you think your building was hit, even if it's just minor, let the insurance company know because their adjusters are supposed to go out and investigate everything. They're supposed to go out and look for damage caused by the storm. You don't have to tell them specifically this exact area or this exact window. If you have that kind of information, certainly share that. But if you just report a claim that says, my building was hit by a category, whatever it is this year, storm, and you've seen leaks, you have roof concerns, whatever it is that you have concerns with in your community, let your insurance company know. And I'll add on to this that I didn't add on before. This all relates to wind insurance claims. Flood insurance claims are a very different animal, and there are very, very strict federal deadlines for reporting those claims. So if you have flood damage, report those immediately because there are typically after a big flooding event, you'll get some extensions, but you want to report that within 60 days maximum. Once you hear back from your flood insurance adjuster, make sure you're paying attention to that. Bring it to legal counsel, bring it to whoever you're working with to make sure that you're responding because those deadlines can cause a denial that you basically becomes impossible to appeal in some situations. So flood, you want to make sure you're reporting very, very quickly and staying on top of those. Wind damage, like your roof, your windows, things like that, report those because it's not likely to affect your premium. Give the insurance company the opportunity to look at everything. And if you agree with them that it is below your deductible, at least you know you have that all documented. And it can help you down the road to show what was documented if you fix it, that it wasn't caused by a storm that might hit you in a few years that might be worse damage. So it's always good to document these things with your insurance company, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wanted to kind of just go back on what you were saying regarding wind damage. I think Ian was a good example. We saw kind of what you had mentioned, Amanda, is Ian, we had, it was the end of the season. I think we had seen, several weeks after Ian that were not only were they dry, we didn't have much rain, but we also didn't see, the temperatures were significantly lower. So the humidity was lower. And what we saw is in my previous experience, I'd been somewhat in that industry, and you saw that the latent damage, the very, it's not visible damage that's there that the wind was causing, either lifting of your roofs, water intrusion through windows and whatnot. Those areas were impacted on the buildings, but it might not necessarily show up, when you go back to the property and look for it. It's not visible damage there. It only shows up later. Or with the effect of Ian, we actually really almost had a year where some of that stuff didn't show up until the following year because of the fact that there wasn't any rain, and it was that rain is what really started to show the signs almost a year later that the buildings were really affected. So I think time is of the essence, kind of going back to the year, you have 1 year to file. Time is of the essence to make sure that you do that, but also work with your manager and your construction or your vendors to make sure that that property is inspected, wholly, that you don't have those issues pop up. So.
And not only that, you got to worry about the insurance carrier and make sure they're financially solvent nowadays too.
Yeah,
So
that's
time
right.
is of the essence, and don't put anything in writing as the board president that says you've evaluated the property and you've sustained no visible damage. Seen that a time or two as well. Do not put that in writing to the stakeholders.
Yeah,
Real quick, Amanda, because we do have a lot to get through, but at the bottom, don't sign any contractual obligations without the review of your advisor or legal counsel, meaning your legal counsel. But some of these bullet points, can you touch on, expenses, keeping debris so that you can determine and validate, substantiate the root cause failure. Also retaining repairs or documentation as they may be reimbursable, so that you are to not sustain any other further damage from a named storm or the environmental elements.
Yeah, I would guess I would say looking at after a storm through a lens of documentation, just like we talked about before the storm, because you want to be able to share all of this information with your insurance company to show them that you had damage that is covered by your insurance policy that you can get paid for, right? They're not just going to pay you and believe you and you say, yeah, I spent $1 million, don't worry about what I did. You have to be able to show them what you did, what was actually damaged, and work with your contractor to make sure that's properly documented as you move through. That's why promptly reporting your claim is important, to give the insurance company that first glance to see as soon as possible what your property looked like. And then as you start your mitigation process, your dry out process, what your reconstruction consists of, making sure that's documented so that that can all be shared with the insurance company of what those expenses were. And by line item and separating those out and having more documentation, you're going to be much quicker and easier to get the insurance company to open coverage and acknowledge those damages.
Also, real quick, one of the biggest mistakes I saw was the mitigation. First of all, when you're retaining a mitigation company for emergency services, you do not have to competitively bid those, okay? You don't have to go out and get 6 bids from whoever to suck out the water and dry out the building. You can choose whoever you want with no competitive bidding required because it's an emergency. However, the rebuild after everything's calmed down and the dry out's done and you're now going to reconstruct, that has to be competitive bid because it's certainly going to be more than 5% of your annual budget. So you have to competitively bid it. The biggest mistake I saw was the dry out company is also a general contractor, and they'll check both boxes on that 2-page form. We're going to do the mitigation and we're going to do the rebuild. And then when the time came, they showed it to us 6 months later. We're saying, look, you didn't competitively bid the rebuild, and guess what? You can get a better price from someone down the street. So you need your legal counsel to look at both contracts and keep that in mind, that you're retaining them initially for the dry out. The rebuild, it's way premature 3 days after the storm to decide who's going to do the rebuild, and you shouldn't even discuss that with them at that time.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even know what the extent of the scope of work and specifications might be, et cetera. So we help facilitate all of that alongside your legal counsel. And we, transmit all the bids to you guys, so that it's, again, transparent. But so many people sign these agreements so quickly and prematurely, have everything reviewed by legal counsel. I think we talked a lot about this, Amanda, but some of these points you may want to hit on if you see anything that stands out, to you, even the process a little bit of, pre-suit mediation versus litigation, the appraisal, expert reports.
Yeah, this could probably be its own webinar, right?
I know.
Briefly, the process of working with your insurance company, and again, as a board of director where you're a volunteer trying to do the best for your community, I don't envy that position at all. Work with your counsel, with your professionals who've been down that road before, and avoid yourselves a lot of headaches in the long term, because it is a process with insurance companies where hopefully you work back and forth together, you give them the information they request, they look at your property, and they make a payment. And if there's something to dispute, you can do that with your professional help, obviously. if they're denying certain aspects of your claim, saying it's not covered by your insurance policy, have those reviewed by your legal counsel, because we can look at that and say, yes, this is a valid exclusion because of what your insurance policy covers, or no, they're interpreting this in a way that I might not. And that leads to a potentially prolonged dispute, but maybe not if you can get ahead of it. Because if you can, again, document and explain everything with your insurance adjuster along the way, they are supposed to work with you. That is how this is supposed to work. My end of things on litigation, I don't always see that. I see probably the worst of the situations, so I'll try not to be biased here, but they are supposed to work with you in this insurance investigation process. And if you receive a denial, evaluating that, seeing what the denial is based on, and hopefully being able to get ahead of that. There are options depending on what's in your insurance policy that will dictate what you can do with a dispute with your insurance company. It will tell you whether you can file a lawsuit, whether you have to go to arbitration, whether you can go to this third option of an appraisal, which is created by insurance policies, and it is supposed to streamline things and take it away from the lawyers and the adjusters and just give it to an appraisal panel, which is basically one person from each side, a neutral, and they can work out your insurance claim and figure out what the amount of your claim is in a much more expedited process a lot of times. These are all options that you're going to want to talk to counsel about, because they differ depending on your insurance policy. So there are a lot of options once you get to a dispute, depending on what that dispute is. My advice would be document things, work with your insurance adjuster, but keep counsel in the loop at least, even if it is just to say, this is where we are at, should we be doing something different? Because you want to make sure that you catch a dispute in time to actually hopefully resolve it without it taking years and years. I will say it is 2025. I still have a handful of associations that are working on their Hurricane Irma claims, which made landfall in 2017. You don't want to be in that category of associations. You want to be able to work out these disputes, hopefully, and it's not always the association's fault, but the more advice you get, the quicker. Hopefully you can avoid that long track.
And I think too, this goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, right? Preparation, having a thoughtful plan, documentation is extremely key when it comes to this portion of it. The more photographic evidence you have, the more work orders for capital improvement, deferred maintenance projects that you have, showing scope and specs and when it was completed, and again, going photo documentation helps with a lot of this. And then also, realizing, folks, it may take time to get through some of this, but having that proactive plan and implementing some of those things hopefully alleviates a long litigious process that you're currently going through with some Irma claims. Richard, I do want to talk about right here. Elimination of one-way attorney fees, and then also the ban on assignment of benefits were two big things that happened in the legislative process. Probably over the last 4 years, we've been working through legislative updates as far as the insurance industry is required. But I think these are two big ones. I'm not sure a lot of people understand what the one-way attorney fee was, as well as the assignment of benefits. I believe they've gotten rid of all of them, and the roofers were the last to be banned from doing this.
Yeah, I'll let Amanda talk about the one-way attorney fees, but AOB was a very popular method before it was banned, assignment of benefits, where you basically turn your claim over to the contractor and let them negotiate everything, and they take whatever you get paid from insurance is what they will accept. They've kind of done a workaround with some of these contracts on their own, which it's not called an AOB, but it effectively is when they say we'll take whatever the insurance company pays, but at least you're still in control of your claim. At the AOB, you had no control over your claim, and they just ran it the way they wanted to. So that's been eliminated legally.
Yeah, I'll touch on that a little bit. The assignment for part of this was banned by statute. And now contractors, being creative, have said, we're not doing anything illegal. You're not assigning us our claim, but don't worry, we'll take care of everything for you. And we'll just take what the insurance company pays us. It basically becomes this same contracted situation, which was banned for a, in my opinion, good reason, that associations weren't paying attention to what was going on with their claims. They were just depending on their contractors to work this out with their insurance companies and hopefully get a new roof at the end of the day. We saw a lot of problems with those. If you're presented with a contract that sounds a lot like that, but doesn't say assignment of benefits, I would say be cautious. Always have counsel review before you sign a contract, but we still are seeing these contracts that basically say, we'll do the work for what your insurance company pays, and don't worry, we'll work with your insurance adjusters when they're on site. It becomes a lot like the same situation that we saw communities run into trouble with. The one-way attorney's fees was eliminated from statute. So it used to be if you had a dispute with your insurance company, you had to file a lawsuit against your insurance company because they wouldn't cover something that you thought was covered by your insurance policy. You went through, you prevailed on that. You could also recover from your insurance company, not just the money that was owed to you under your insurance policy for the damage to your building, but you could also recover your attorney's fees in the cost of collecting that money. That is no longer in existence. So if you have a dispute with your insurance company, you're going to have to basically pay your attorney to get that money from your insurance company.
And if I remember correctly, I think Florida was the last state to have that rule in place. That was when it got denied here, or when it got removed here. We were the last state to have that, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. One thing here was the expansion of the MySafe Florida Home Program. So they've reallocated funds. They put nearly $500 million into this for single family residents. They've implemented a MySafe Florida condominium pilot program, which a appropriations committee allocated $30 million for last year. It's been approved in this past legislative session, although we don't know the funding behind that yet. It has to be 3 stories or greater now. So make sure it's $175,000 they'll do a 2-for-1 match. So every dollar you spend, they'll give you $2 back for hardening your building or buildings up into $175,000. All right, so how do we make all of this work and be put back together? As we've alluded to throughout the webinar, construction projects are hard. Very rarely do they come in on time, on budget. And so for us, being project management, construction management, as well as engineering and advisors, everything under one roof, we consolidate the process and hopefully alleviate some of those pain points for you. So the reconstruction process, everyone follows the same kind of suit. Authorize a proposal, we get an inquiry, or somebody reaches out for a particular issue. It doesn't have to be hurricane related. It could be just general re-roofs, painting, waterproofing, concrete restoration, windows, doors, whatever. We develop a proposal, scope of work, specifications, as well as a time frame and a cost for you. So everything is done in an arm's length. If Richard has to review another proposal of ours, he'll probably be sick. But nonetheless, I still encourage you to review these or have them review them. Site analysis is performed, and then we develop a comprehensive scope of work and specifications. We may do everything under one roof, depending on what it is. We may go outside as well and retain civil engineers, structural engineers, landscape architects, DEP engineers as well. We work with a lot of them. And through there, we develop that comprehensive scope of work, the specifications that Richard was alluding to earlier, which allows us to accurately bid the project out for you. I am not hammering any nails in your wall. I'm not painting any part of your building. I am simply there as your professional service provider and construction management firm. So everything is sent out to bid. We review those bids, tabulate those, and help you come up with the contractual development. We want to be in control of that as the association, not necessarily me, but the association. Again, going back to Richard's review of that contract as well, to protect you as the association and make sure it's not detrimental. Everything the contractor is going to do is there to develop and alleviate ways for them to be sued or indemnify them. Site inspections during the reconstruction process, constant communication through biweekly or weekly meetings, and all the way through closeout. Release of liens are extremely important. Permit closeout, people get excited. We're at the end of the project and all of a sudden we forget release of liens, we forget to close out permits. If you forget to close out a roofing permit and 2 years later you're going to sell a unit, unfortunately, you have to tear off a portion of that roof in order to validate what was done, what was used, and then provide an opinion letter to the county. Everything is done that we do in Sage. So as you can see, this is our software. All of these bids are furnished to you. So it may be 3, 4, 5, 6 bids per application, but everything is shared to you. And we go out, we can see when they open it, who opens it. It's based off historical data, so we know you're not being taken advantage of. And then we give you a conceptual estimate. When you look at roofing, there could be 30 different components to a roofing project, and there's hard cost, soft cost. Everything is calculated for you, so you have a true understanding of what that project may cost. Now, if you're doing a project like that, just in general, you may want to start, or you should start 6 to 9, 12 months ahead of time preparing for that project. And then we can accurately bid it. Your reserve study only takes you so far. It's looking at one number. What is the roofing application? But we create variances for sheathing. What type of tile do you want? What type of underlayment do you want? Is there any fascia, downspouts, etc.? Landscaping that needs to be addressed. And then we use Procore. Through that process, that is our project management tool. So every day we're doing daily reports, project management, pay application reviews, RFIs, any change orders or shop drawings that may need to be resubmitted. And then we consolidate that all down to one unified punch list, which makes it easy for the contractor to check off item by item and make sure that the association is taken care of. Scheduling through Workforce, we do develop a schedule, a critical path to completion. So everything, now some of this is weather dependent, but we have to have this so that we can advocate for the association's benefit to make sure that we understand where are we at in the project, where are our pay applications at, and where should they be. What is our path to completion, and are we on time? Are we early? Are we late? And how, if we are late or we have issues that arise, how do we navigate those and keep on course as much as possible? So how does this all come together? And this is really what I want to get to. Hurricane re-roof case study. This is a real life example in Estero. We had more than 150 roofs that went through Hurricane Irma. They were deemed to be damaged. They settled. It was 154 two-story residential buildings. That cost was estimated at $18+ million and scheduled to take 14+ months, 14 to 16 months. Through a proactive planning approach and a comprehensive scope of work, specifications, as well as pre-construction, site safety, site storage, and the implementation of a thoughtful strategic plan with their crews and the contractor. That project came in at just over $17 million, nearly $1 million under budget, as well as completed 5 months ahead of schedule. This is how the association when you say, well, it's going to take money to pay for you. Yes, it takes money to pay for all professional service providers, but our goal is to get it done as in the most economical way and the most timely way as possible without sacrificing any of the quality or workmanship that you would come to expect. So that is kind of how everything comes together. I do want to put this up on the screen. We can answer any questions for you. I don't know if Shauna has any, but I do want to thank every one of the panelists for joining us today and working with us, as well as Chris and Shauna for helping put this on. And thank you guys. We know that you have an option for people to choose as far as vendors or education, but we appreciate you taking the time to sit in and listen to us today.
I'll just add to that. Thank you guys. Yes, I appreciate it. And thank you all for that attended this. I think that the information here is vital for obviously after a hurricane or before a hurricane to be prepared. But again, kind of going back to what Richard and Derek both mentioned was while it's important to to be prepared, the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway from this is to make sure that you have your plans in place, that you're organized. Castle does a wonderful job of pre-planning that prior to going through, making sure that we do a test run, beforehand, a dry run of our season, just to make sure that we are prepared for this. It's something that helps us to make sure to go through the process and make sure that, if there are hiccups or anything else, that we iron those out prior to. So no different than on here. So we just want to make sure that you do get that, and we thank you guys all for your time. So anybody else got anything else? And I think we're okay on questions. So if there is anything else,
honestly, I just want to say this particular group, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. We've all been in the industry for quite a while. Some of us, Chris, in one capacity or another, you and me. We have a couple different backgrounds, but great group, and I thought this was so educational for everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for Mike and Castle for organizing it.
Yes, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
You guys for attending. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you guys. Take care.